Welcome to Your College Bound Kid,
a podcast for parents, college counselors, students, and anyone who wants a weekly deep dive into the world of college admissions.
My name is Vince, and I've been doing admissions since 1989 and college counseling since 1998 in California.
I'm Lisa, and I'm a clinical psychologist and college counselor. I have a daughter in college, a daughter in high school, and a son in middle school. After 30 years in Chicago, we recently moved to North Carolina.
My name is Mark. I'm a college coach in Atlanta and the parent of two daughters. Karis, a graduate of Davidson College, and she is the founder of the Spanish tutoring company, SpanishHelpToday.com. Joy has a bachelor's degree from the University of Georgia and a master's degree from North Carolina State University. She works in private practice in Raleigh as a mental health therapist. And I'm so blessed to be able to work alongside both my beautiful daughters at School Match for You, a college counseling firm that I founded in 2010. This week in the news, Vince will continue his panoramic view of the University of California as he'll go through all 9 schools and give us insights in each of the 9 schools. And for our Speakpipe question, Julia will join me to take a question from Jessica, an international listener. And she has a question about how to navigate the terrain when colleges are switching from test optional to test mandatory. And Lisa will continue her interview with Jeremy Lowe, the VP of Enrollment at American University. And that will be part 2 of 2. And then I will continue with my interview with Chris Cage, the VP of Enrollment at Belmont University, on understanding Belmont University. And this is part 2 of 3.
So as we get into the profiles, after talking a little bit about admissions, the first one that I like to talk about is Berkeley. Urban, suburban for sure. You get a mix of both. You have houses, you have city life right out there. There's active political engagement can be really strong. 32,000 undergraduates there, and they have an admit rate of about 13%, 96% retention rate. Their 4-year graduation rate is 81%, and their 6-year graduation rate is 93%. So it goes up significantly. I think that Berkeley is really a vibrant city. It has a lot of energy. There's a lot of sort of like hippie-ish stores. There's a lot of, if you think back to the 60s, there's a lot of activism, and a lot of that is being renewed, and that can cause conflict. Berkeley is one of the few UCs that has a business school, and you can be a direct MIT for the last 2 years into their business school, but you can also get in as a sophomore, and they have a very distinct process and culture to help students get into their business school. And then the proximity to the first tech center of here in the United States, Silicon Valley, is right there, and they have a lot of cross opportunities with Silicon Valley. So Berkeley, nationally or internationally, probably has the strongest reputation. And that's one campus that most of my students would apply to. Any questions about Berkeley?
Nothing comes to mind other than, I know you and I have talked before, had the thing with the homeless problem around the area. Do you feel like there's a family and we all work with them, and when they say they don't want something urban, they really don't want something urban? Is that someone you would not refer to Berkeley? Do you think it would feel not safe or you know what I mean? This is intimidating.
It was interesting because I think before my visit 2 years ago, when I had a student who grew up in the Palisades, she gave me a tour, and because of where she lived on campus, she didn't, with the exception of going into like maybe some restaurants, she had very little interaction off campus. And because of where they have housing, it's like a row of houses, which is behind the campus, which is very, very safe. I did feel safe, and she felt safe. And they had done, like a lot of schools, they have particular apps and all these resources to make sure that people feel good and safe. But if they were looking to avoid an overtly political and urban-like campus, Berkeley would probably be one of those campuses that would have to come onto the list because it is right there.
You know how you said Berkeley probably has the strongest reputation internationally? I feel like that's probably true, especially, but I mean, UCLA obviously being a close second, but it feels like within California, do you feel like UCLA is the school of first choice and it wins its overlap battles with Berkeley within California, or does it go back and forth year by year?
Wow, that's a good. I think UCLA has the highest yield. I think they went. They went. Part of it is because, in my opinion, I think it's where UCLA is. They don't have Berkeley surrounding it, and Westwood is very. There's just a lot of stores. And it's very, Beverly Hills butts up right against the back of the campus, so it's a very safe campus. It's urban. Well, to me, it's more suburban than anything, but has a distinct different urban feel than Berkeley. And so I think when students are thinking about down the line, like going to a campus where they're probably going to be good in football and basketball, at least they're going to put the dollars in to try to be good.
All right.
Sports, school spirit, and then guaranteed housing within 5 years. That place is going to be a beast. It's going to be the new UVA and UNC.
Now, what about, you mentioned something that surprised me a little, the growth of Merced. Because nobody asks me about Merced. I just never get asked about it. I know Merced and Riverside are the newest UCs, and I know it takes longer when you're newer to get established. Do you see the growth in applications with Merced across all socioeconomic, groups, or do you think it's more with first gen, Pell, and look, this is a great bargain opportunity. They can get the Cal grant and they can get in there and get a UC education like real affordably, or do you see Merced starting to pull more from other socioeconomic groups as well?
I think that it's still not pulling from most of the state. And UC Merced was the University of California's nod to the breadbasket of California's in the central part of it, and there wasn't a UC in the central part of California. I think it's a very strong, like if you're from the Central Valley and your parents are like not open to you going too far away and you want a very strong personal, small, like classes are small, you get a lot of a personal attention. They have a new guaranteed medical school program up there. I think it will shift over time, but Merced, like the rest of California, the Central Valley is where you're seeing a lot of growth in population. So one day Merced might be a player, but at this point it's very regional and is primarily drawing from the middle of California.
Okay, great. Who do you want to talk about next?
All right, so we're going to talk a little bit about UC Davis, and UC Davis suburban. It's about 14 miles away from Sacramento, so super easy to get to from the Bay Area, Oakland, and San Francisco. And then 14 miles from Sacramento, 31,000 undergraduates. Like I said, flat campus. They have a 4-year graduation, or they have a retention rate of 93%, which I think is great, and a 4-year graduation rate of 66%, which I thought was really interesting and kind of low. I felt, but that could be because, like you said, Pell eligible students, maybe more of them are choosing Davis, and they're certainly admitted to Davis in high numbers. And then the 6-year graduation rate is 86%. The one thing I love about UC Davis, think of flat, sprawling, tons of bike paths. People are walking, they're skateboarding. It's a great mixture of seriousness and walking and casualness, outdoor fun. There are forests everywhere, and there are just so many options for students to really explore their opportunities there. They have this really, really strong reputation in medicine, veterinary medicine, particularly agricultural programs. And if you're looking for regular architecture, that's a great campus to be at for sure.
And Vince, I want to clarify what I said. Pell students who are not first gen will likely have a high graduation rate if they are high achieving students. Where I see the correlation to lower graduates is with commuter students, non-traditional students, many of whom are part-time and working 30 plus hours, and with first gen students because they just don't have those parental models and bearings and orientation to college. I do see a correlation between Pell and low graduation rates when a school gaps students financially or for lower GPA students who are admitted to non-selective schools. So I always ask myself, how many commuter students, how many part-time students does the college gap students with their financial aid awards, and how many first-gen students attend? This is often what explains lower graduation rates. Yeah, and I know that med school is there too.
And a law school.
Yeah.
And a law school. And then let's talk a little bit about Irvine as well. Irvine, suburban, beautiful. I mean, beautiful campus, planned campus community, which means it's a very safe environment. UC Irvine is the campus that's probably, besides UCLA, risen the most in number of applications. I love visiting Irvine. You feel as if you're in some, you're abroad in some Asian country. It's just a large population, both near campus. So if you had a student, Mark, who wanted a strong Chinese or Vietnamese community, that's going to be not only on the campus, but right off campus as well. The campus community, Orange County, is very eco-friendly. There's the medical school. There's a law school that has a strong reputation, and it's one of those few schools that has a business school like Berkeley. And so because of where it's located, there are lots of jobs. Orange County and Irvine in particular, that part of Orange County, there's just tremendous growth. And literally you're 5 miles away from the beach. So traffic wise, and this is how they do it in LA, nobody says 5 miles. That means like 30 minutes from now, I could be at the beach. So Irvine is a great campus. And I think when I'm talking to students, the thing that drives them there is going to be something in science and increasingly something in business.
Yeah, because they've got the undergraduate business.
Yeah.
And then really strong real estate too.
Yes, really strong real estate and lots of opportunities for internships, because that area is a place where a lot of families are moving to, because there are great public high schools. I think Orange County, for all the money that's there, it's surprising how few private schools there are in Orange County. That will, probably change over the next 20 years, but they're not all of the private options that you have like you do in LA. All right, so UCLA, small, 419 acres. But recently they purchased 3 other campuses. They have a downtown campus. They'll have a downtown campus. They bought this amazing plot of land where Marymount College used to be. They also bought the dorms that were attached to the naval base. So you're going to see, I don't know what's going to go down there. I'd be really curious. But UCLA they have this in the future. Will they have this, guaranteed to house everyone there? 33,000 undergraduates. You see a major play. They want to be a national player in terms of research and sports. They're always trying to work out, when they're recruiting for basketball or football, that's a serious contender. And I think hopefully with the right program, we'll start to see some of that happen. They have over 90% retention rate. UCLA has the highest graduation rate in the University of California. 89% finish in 4 years, 92% finish in 6 years. It's just, it has everything. If you're looking for one UC that has like the sort of classical, good in academics, good in social life, good in athletics, all those things, then UCLA is going to be your place. And you have the added benefit of also being another tech center. So Silicon Valley is 15 minutes away. And then it's the entertainment capital of the world. So for a student who can get into the film school your junior year, it's terrific. Silicon Beach is 15 minutes from UCLA and gives family or students opportunities to work with Amazon, Google, Netflix. All of those are literally 15 to 20 minutes. Now, again, in traffic, that means 45.
So, Vince, let's talk about some of these schools for a second, because we've been going over some of the really selective ones, Berkeley, UCLA, Irvine. Obviously, there's other super selective ones too, San Diego. To me, Santa Barbara, you can pretty much almost put them in that same group these days. They're really close, if not there. I know you gave acceptance rates, but I think what might be helpful for the listener is for you to give a sense of the kind of student that you see being competitive. And I know major makes a huge difference, but I think acceptance rate doesn't help as much as if maybe you give a profile of a kind of kid that maybe has a 50-50 shot at those schools, in-state, out-of-state, and anything you want to share on that, just to give. We have a lot of parents who listen that are doing this process themselves. They're using the podcast and other resources to kind of be their kids' college coach.
Sure.
And one of the things those parents have told me, and when I've met with them, is the hard part for me is I don't really see enough decisions to kind of know, is this school realistic or not? And not that I expect that what you share will be a panacea for that. And now I get it. But I think you can maybe give a sense about a profile of an applicant that has a good shot, could kind of go either way, or would be highly unlikely to yield success. Anything you want to share on that?
Yeah. So I would say that for people who are applying out of state, if you apply to the schools, not UCLA, Irvine, Santa Barbara, San Diego, and you applied to Davis, Santa Cruz, Riverside, or Merced, you would find a lot of flexibility. You might see students with a 3.5 GPA who are competitive. Remember, when we read applications for the University of California, we look at your 10th and 11th grade. So students who have a strong AB record would be, solid candidates for those campuses. I think for San Diego, Santa Barbara, Irvine, Berkeley, UCLA, you have to be a very strong student, and it has to be the right mix of strength and grades, strength in if you go to a school that has AP exams, that you show some strength there. If you go to a school, if you're from Washington State and you're taking community college classes at the same time and you're bringing a lot of credit with you, they'll love that. The more credit you're going to bring, the more likely you are to finish in 4 years, the stronger you are going to be as an applicant. So I think for the ones that are the most competitive, you have to be a great mix of both academic strength in 10th and 11th, and in terms of leadership and involvement, you need to have some strengths there as well. Does that help a little bit?
Yeah. I'll tell you what I see, and I want you to correct me and if you see anything any differently than this. So Merced and Riverside, I see as the two easiest to get in of the 9. Santa Cruz is next.
Yeah.
Davis is next. But Santa Cruz, to me, is still quite a bit harder than Riverside or Merced. And Davis is noticeably harder than Santa Cruz.
Yeah, but I would say Santa Cruz is not far behind. They're probably closer together than the difference between Santa Cruz and Merced and Riverside. But Riverside is also, because they have a 6-year medical school program, that's also coming up strong as well.
Yeah, especially when they're newer. The newer schools just take more time to get them. Once they get word out and they start getting alumni and get more established. I know Riverside and Merced are the two newest ones. And then the other 5, they're all hard. Santa Barbara, San Diego, Irvine, UCLA, and Berkeley. all five of them are hard. I notice. Like occasionally I'll see, especially for out of state and in state too, especially Berkeley and UCLA, San Diego, Irvine, and then certain majors, they're really tough in state.
Right, right. I would say if you were applying to those top schools and you're applying from out of state, you're going to stand a better chance if you have a major outside of the top 8.
Mm-hmm.
So if you said my major is English and you somehow show that you want to be an English major, you might stand a better chance than if you said, you're definitely going to stand a better chance than if you say business or computer engineering.
Yeah, I've had the most success out of state with those 5, with like for kids that weren't just total rock stars, with Santa Barbara.
Mm-hmm.
That's where I've had the most success. But UCSB out-of-state admits are still really strong, especially in the last 3 years. Berkeley and UCLA, and they're just brutal out of state. Of course, a lot of the times the kids are in those tough majors too.
Yeah.
Like the combination of tough major, out of state. I mean, like it's not uncommon at all for kids to be getting in Ivies and not getting in those schools, even sometimes in-state, Vince.
Yes, that's absolutely true. Absolutely true. You know, I had a kid who got into Stanford and Brown and Duke and Northwestern, deny Berkeley. And I was like, and they were just starting up the major. And I was like, this person won a science fair. I don't know what more you want from them. So I don't know what was happening there. But one thing I wanted to do too, Mark, is I just wanted to make sure I covered the last, I think there's 4 more that I
Yeah, because I don't think you haven't got yet to San Diego, Riverside. Go ahead. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So just a little bit about Merced in terms of statistics, rural desert, Central California, listen to this. Most of the UCs I talked about all had student populations over 30,000. This has 8,000 students.
Wow.
So you're going to be in a class where people are going to be paying attention to you. The admit rate is significantly high. They're admitting almost 70% of the applicants. The retention rate from first to second year is 83%. The 4-year graduation rate, they're hopefully working on this, is about 51%, and 6-year is 69%. But again, I think you really need to think about who are they educating. So once you that campus is predominantly a Hispanic serving institution for sure.
Mm-hmm. And I don't know, I'm sure it's true this year. I know it was true last year. I see merit scholarships come out of Merced and Riverside for out-of-state kids, like that you just don't see for those other UCs.
Yeah. And I think if for somebody coming from out of state, the most growth in the state in terms of business and population is happening in Riverside. So there's a lot of good things. You know, Amazon is out there now. So there's a lot of great growth happening in Riverside. So Riverside, suburban, again, a little bit smaller, 22,000 undergraduates. They're admitting probably 60% of the applicants. The retention rate is actually quite strong, 88% from first to second year. 4-year graduation is 64%. 6-year graduation rate is 76%. It's really important. I have never seen among the bands options, but they have one of the best mariachi bands I have ever heard in my life. And just going off of what you said a couple of weeks ago, Mark, they have one of the strongest entomology programs because Riverside used to be a huge place where they grew oranges.
There you go. Got to take advantage of what's in your backyard.
So if you want to be the expert, UC Riverside will probably pay you money to come out there. And then UC San Diego, 1,152 acres. I would say it's suburban. Some people think that that's urban, but to me, it's really suburban. It's in La Jolla, which I said before is a really fancy part of San Diego County. 33,000 undergraduates. Now, this is a place that really chooses their students well. First to second year retention rate is 95%. 4-year graduation rate is 74% and 5-year is 83%. I expect that will change as maybe perhaps the campus environment becomes a little bit more lively. UC San Diego is the only UC I've ever had a student transfer from. And it's because they think it's, kind of stayed. But it's an amazing opportunity for research. You are right. Like you could see the beach from your dorm room if you're in the right dorm. They also have, think of UC San Diego as having 8 neighborhoods. And each of those neighborhoods is organized around a specific academic theme where you fulfill your liberal arts requirements. So it could be related to service or the environment or to intellectual vitality. And so San Diego has a strong campus community of people who tend to be pretty calm. But boy, is that campus beautiful. And I like the way that they organize their campus life. And then finally, Santa Barbara, beachside. I'll say that one more time, beachside, 23,000. If they had the space, they could easily have 50,000 students if they wanted. But they have 23,000 students. They're admitting a little under, I think this year will be a little under 20%, 90% retention rate. Hopefully over time, their 4-year rate goes up a little bit, 71% 4-year graduation rate and 6-year 85%. The one thing that I would say is unique at Santa Barbara is there's not as many majors as you might find it at Irvine or San Diego. And part of it is that they don't have the space or the land. So there's economics and there's a little, like a few business classes, but there's no business economics major. So you're not going to find sort of the range that you would see at the other UC campuses. And then Santa Cruz, gosh, that place is beautiful, but get ready to walk up and down hills. That's one thing I would say. 2,000 acres, 17,000 students. So again, a lot of personal attention. They're taking about 30% of their applicants, a really strong retention rate because you can serve. You have to get a wetsuit because that water is really cold. 4-year, 76% finish in 4 years and 75% in 6 years. I'm not sure why that doesn't improve a little bit more over time. And they also are near the Pacific Ocean, so that's close to campus. But you also have this beautiful forest surrounding the campus. People at Santa Cruz are committed to making the lives of others better, not more so than the other campuses, but that seems to be a theme of everyone who goes there. And then if you want a place where you can enjoy the outdoors, Santa Cruz, Davis, San Diego, Santa Barbara would be places that really emphasize that kind of strength. So Santa Cruz increasingly becomes popular and is a great option. Laid back student is what I would say about Santa Cruz.
So laid back for Santa Cruz. Would you say laid back for Santa Barbara?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Laid back and with a nod to intensity because that student body is getting increasingly very strong academically. So they're getting a little bit more of type A at Santa Barbara.
Is there a place that's more, I know it's California, so someone feels funny asking this, but there's degrees. Is there a place that feels preppier?
Preppier? Wow, that's a great question. Preppier, I would say, wow, that's a good question. Irvine, UCLA has that spirit of prep, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Sort of the intense academic push, San Diego, Irvine, UCLA, Berkeley. Boom, boom, boom. Like those kids are really grinding it out and they're working hard because they see in their future some kind of graduate school.
Let me tell you some of the complaints I hear about the UCs, and you can tell me if they're valid or not. One is class sizes are large. Yeah. Another is a lot of majors are impacted. And a third one is it can be hard getting housing. What are your thoughts on those three things?
2 of the 3, I think class sizes, because the campuses have done a pretty good job. The average class size is going to feel like a large public high school class. So you're going to see somewhere between most classes between 25 and 35. I think they do a good job making sure that the upper level classes are going to be more, like I said, 25 to 35. Now, in terms of housing, that is a problem. And so and the more expensive area, like the most expensive area to live in is going to be Westwood and Berkeley. And so you're going to see significant costs in terms of housing and finding housing. Now, I think at all these places, you're going to be able to get housing, but what the difference in what you pay in Riverside is going to be vastly different than what you would pay at UC San Diego, Berkeley, or UCLA. And then the last one was what?
Impacted majors.
Absolutely. That's why you see, last week, when we sent that in the group text, UC San Diego, 12,000 applications for 200 spots in engineering. They could open up 3 more engineering schools before. I mean, there's all these kids with this talent. I wish there were more spaces, but there's definitely a problem with impacted majors. And again, if you're applying in one of those 8 majors, you're going to have to that's going to make your process of getting into one of the UCs harder if you choose one of those majors.
And you mentioned upper level classes like high school, 25 to 35. But what about first and second year classes? What are you looking at class size wise there?
Oh, you're going to see 200 to 300 for sure.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Which I think you would see that at Alabama. You would see that at any major public university. Introductory classes are going to be larger.
Do you feel there's like any sort of, besides the fact that they're all UCs, is there anything that like common thread that sort of unites the schools at all? Or do you think they're so different that it's just, they happen to be all part of the same system, but the schools are so different that,
They're all so different. I mean, they're unified in the way that they are fulfilling the master plan that was created in the 60s. And in that, they're impressive in their scope and their range. But in terms of like a San Diego student would make fun of a Berkeley student by saying you go to UCB, you would never say that. They think, Berkeley students think of themselves as Berkeley students. But if you want to tease them, you would say, oh, you go to UCB, you're a UCB student. So
it's this inside baseball always when you get into the weeds.
But you do get some sports competition, and that's where you would see UCLA and Berkeley. There's still that strong tradition. Davis would love to be a part of that competition, and if they see the growth there and success that other schools have, I think Davis is a really good place to go to college. Of all the UCs, if you were looking for a place where the community really supports the students on the campus, it would definitely, absolutely be Davis.
Wow, that's fascinating. This has been great. Can you just once again reaffirm those 8 majors that are just really tough?
Engineering, economics, business, science, psychology, communication.
Comp sci.
Oh, yes. Computer science. Sorry, how did I forget that? I think I got them all, but those would be the ones.
And are there any specific ones where you see, wow, I can't believe that kid got in that UC in that major? Sort of the opposite, Like, is the opposite also true? Like undersubscribed majors where you see them go way out of profile for?
Yes.
What are a few of those?
I think the things, if you had a student who was strong in linguistics, they would, they have all these professors teaching language. So
sure.
Linguistics,
so similar to what we see in other places in the country. Yeah. Humanities, a lot of the humanities stuff, philosophy, languages. Yeah.
History even.
History. Yeah, that's humanities. Yeah.
Geography. Just, if students knew the jobs available, if they were a geography major and all the colleges that offer that major, they might actually apply to it.
Visual arts?
Visual arts, absolutely. Nobody does it better than UCLA is probably the top rank, performing and visual arts public university in the world.
And what about transferring within majors or within schools when you get to a school? Like you applied for this, how easy, hard, depends on the school. Anything you can share on that?
I would say, again, if you're trying to go from arts and science to engineering, never.
Mm-hmm.
Not going to happen. And it might be a little bit easy. It might be more possible, but still hard at, Merced, Riverside, Santa Cruz. I think the door is still open, but it's not open very wide, I would say. And then Berkeley has done a great job. Haas School of Business has done a great job saving a majority of the space for sophomores. They have a very clear articulated path. You can meet with people, they'll help you apply. They have all these sessions to help you. I don't see or hear about that at the other campuses, that having that. Like Irvine, I think if you don't get into business as an undergrad, it's not going to happen.
Cool.
So it depends on the school for sure.
Vince, this has been awesome. I think it's going to help a lot of people. For those of you who don't know, there's a UC app. And so on one application, you can apply to one school or 9 school or anywhere in between. And so I think a lot of people are really curious, like, how are these places different? And I appreciate the panoramic view. I'm really thankful for you for this. I've learned things I didn't know, and I'm sure our listeners have as well. So thanks a lot, my friend.
Thank you, and have a great week.
It's all right. And then we'll look forward to, you'll be back again soon. We're going to do one with you and Hillary and Julia and Susan, and we're going to do a deep dive on the activities section. And
yes.
And I almost gave this tip, it's a great time for juniors to bang out that activity section. It's not going to change between now and August 1 when the Common App opens up. So hopefully we'll be able to give you guys some good pointers on that. Awesome. See you soon, my friend.
And now it's time for a question from one of our listeners.
So, Julia, we're going to play a great question from Jessica, who's overseas, and she has a question about taking the SAT or ACT again.
Hi, Mark. My name is Jessica, and I'm calling from overseas. I'm a longtime listener since the time my oldest was going through the process about 5 years ago. I'm now working with my grade 11 daughter, and I think she has a really great, realistic list of schools, all of which she'd be very happy to attend. She just took the SAT, and while I think her scores are sufficient for her likely admit schools, they're just below the 25th percentile for the couple of reach schools on her list. Having heard many of your discussions about when to submit scores, I suspect you would advise her not to submit her scores to those reach schools, as the scores don't improve on her already strong transcript from a rigorous academic program. However, given the recent announcement from several high-profile schools that they're returning to requiring standardized tests, I'm concerned that there may be a domino effect, and many schools, including those on my daughter's list, will follow suit. Some of those whose test optional policies are temporary haven't yet announced their policies for the class of 2025. Do you think she should take the test again to see if she can improve in case those schools do require the test starting next year? And as a follow-up, as schools start demanding that everyone submit, do you think we'll see the average test scores start trending lower, since many students over the past few years simply didn't submit scores that didn't clearly help their chances of admission? We were hoping that the SAT would be behind her so she could focus on her actual coursework and also have more time to enjoy her last year or so in high school, but also want her to have the best chance at all the schools on her list. I'd love to hear what you think. Love the podcast and all you do to help students and parents through this process. Take care.
Well, thank you, Jessica, because this is a question on my mind as well. And I know, Mark, you and I and the rest of the College Bound Kid family, we talk about this a lot too. I am disappointed in the timing of colleges to say that they're going back to standardized testing for this next admission cycle. I don't think it's fair to students. They didn't give them enough time to prepare. So that being said, while I very much hope you and my Jessica and my and everyone else's fears are unfounded, the reality is that more schools are going back to standardized testing. So even before some of those dominoes fell this year, I always suggested a student take the test, either the SAT or the ACT, whatever they decided, twice anyways. There's a variety of reasons that you might want to do that. And I do feel badly because I do know that the test is cost prohibitive and it's very hard to get a fee waiver. And it's also a lot of time on a Saturday. So I do recognize that what I'm saying comes also from a place of privilege, but there's quite a lot of scholarships that do ask for an SAT or ACT score. There are plenty of colleges that are still test optional that actually even maybe a score that is not in the top 25% for the most selective would make a huge difference and very much help the applicant. And then what I say to my students is, worst case scenario, you gave it 2 shots. Research does show that the score does improve on the second time. And then sometimes my students who are kind of test averse, but know that they should give themselves 2 shots will, that they'll just sort of study what they need to improve the score overall, or maybe it's just a section or a subsection. And so it's just 2 times and it's very likely your score goes up. And then for some of my students, I've seen that the score, even after the second time, gets really close. And so that really helps to a score that they really want to report everywhere. So I always say 2 is a good idea anyways. And then if you don't need to report it, great. You lost a little time, you lost some money, but at least you're prepared for anyone who might need a score from you and you took your best shot at it. The one time I don't recommend, this is sort of what I've been saying to students, I don't know about you, Mark, but if I have a student who's likely going to apply to very selective schools, so maybe a lot of their list will be schools that admit less than 40% of their applicants, and they take maybe the SAT the first time and they're not breaking the 1200 score, and if they take the ACT and they're not breaking the 27 score, then I say, I'm not sure it's worth it for us to take a second time, because I don't think we'll get anywhere close to a score that we'd want to report to an uber selective school. But I say take it twice pretty much almost all the time, unless it causes the student agony or their score is really below the average threshold in my area.
So I have several thoughts. One is, what are the score averages at the high school you're coming from? Because a lot of schools, if they're really doing holistic admissions, they do look at that. And, you could, especially if you have some other hook as well, combine that with the fact that if you're in the upper, 10th decile at your school, even quintile of your own school, that does get factored in, because they are going to look at you from the context that you're coming. So that's one thing I wanted to say. I would say students should be prepared to take the test twice and plan accordingly by having 2 test dates in mind, at least 2 months apart. But if you crush the test on your first time, then no need to take it again. Every year I have a student that gets like a 35 or 36, 1550 plus the first time, and I tell them you're done. And then you can cancel that second test you had planned for. If you heard my 63-minute interview with Jed Appleruth on episode 422, even Jed, who's a huge proponent of testing, said plan to take the test 3 times, but if you get your score on test 1, you're done. The other thing I wanted to say, and boy, this is so nuanced, I hope to capture the nuance right on these next 2 points, that it feels to more people like everybody's going back to testing than actually happened. It's just because certain schools carry such prominent weight either in the media or in our psyche, right? So think about it. Like, who's announced that they're returning to testing in the last 3-6 months or less than that, right? So you have Harvard, Yale, even that it's test flexible, but you have to submit testing. So let's say Harvard, Yale, Brown, Dartmouth, Texas, Caltech. Who did I leave out?
No, I'm just shaking my head because I'm still mad about Caltech a lot.
Sure. Because they had such a reversal from test blind, score free, test free to mandatory immediately. So on one sense, I do want people, I've had a number of questions like this from clients I'm working with. The perception out there is that almost everybody's going back to testing.
Right.
And that's just not true. Like, so many schools, for one, they've already announced their policy for 2025. There's a small number that hadn't. Of course, there's Harvard who reversed their decision, had said that they were going to be, test optional through high school class 2026, college test 2030. So that's a little disappointing when you think, okay, I know where you stand, and then you reverse it. But still, it's a very short number. It's a very short number. So I just want to clear up. It's not like everybody's going back to testing. Now, here's where I say I want to make sure I capture the nuance. I've said this on this podcast many times. Test optional schools still like good test scores. So I don't want to give the impression that if you're not requiring scores, then that doesn't mean scores don't matter at all.
Right.
A lot of times at test optional schools, especially if they're selective, they're test optional because, one, they think they have enough tools in the toolkit to be able to admit admissible kids, and they can bring in exciting, interesting kids that can make the quality of the school better. But the more selective the school, the more the magnifying glass gets pulled out without test scores. And there's going to be tremendous scrutiny, especially on your academic oomph. Right? Like, I remember us having a conversation with, this is a long time ago, Julia. This was a former Haverford admission officer.
Oh, wow.
Okay. And who was one of my former students, by the way. And this is when I was at KIPP. And I was talking about a particular student that, and they were talking about, hey, we can be a little bit of flexible on scores, but we can't be flexible on scores and rigor and grades and grade trends, right? So that other piece is going to come under a lot more scrutiny. Yeah. And I also believe that there are schools that were test optional, and they were mostly test optional either because they were afraid that their competitors are test optional and it would hurt them, or just in general, they're scared of getting less applications. And that doesn't mean they didn't really like test scores.
Right.
I saw that with Spelman this year. I'm absolutely convinced of a student that would have got into Spelman if they didn't submit scores. I'm convinced of it. And so, and also in the past, scores had played a big role in the merit scholarships. So that's also a factor. And I know this makes it really complicated because basically what I'm saying is, yeah, there are some schools that say they're test optional, but there's a range of what people mean when they say they're test optional. That does not mean the same thing for everybody. Like, yeah, it technically means that your application can be complete without scores. But for some places, it's a complete non-factor in how they do their reader rating. And then for others, it's not. It just isn't. And so, and I know that doesn't give people the certainty because then the inference is, well, what am I supposed to do with that?
Right.
All, we can try to do is have conversations with the admission officers, see what they say, and then look at who you actually admit. But I do believe that there is some wisdom in, were you test optional pre-pandemic? Or did you go because of the pandemic? And how long have you been test optional?
Right.
When you've been test optional for a while, like your readers are so used to reading in that context that they really feel confident that they don't need scores, as well as what percentage of the kids are submitting scores to the schools that you're looking at. So there are a lot of factors. I don't want Jessica to have her student obsessing over testing because that's just not a fun way to go to high school. And a lot of times it doesn't work, especially if the student is absolutely recalcitrant and like, I don't want to do this anymore. Like, so to me, that's just not always productive. If anything, just be very conscious of the schools that you select and apply to. Yeah.
Agreed.
Yeah. Awesome. Anything else?
No, I thought that was a great question. And I hope our panic is unfounded, Jessica.
Yeah, well, here's what I do want to say. There going to be a lot more next year. I think that is evident. And I'm so upset with the University of North Carolina that has still not made an announcement. And they've got an announcement coming out and for 2025. So like how you can do that to students is to me unfathomable. So is it possible though? But there's not going to be a cascade, in my opinion, of of dozens of schools that are going to announce in May and June that they're test optional for this year's upcoming class. And I sense that part of the question was concerned about that. That I do not see happening. Most schools have carved out their space for the class of 2025. I can't say what will happen for 2026, but most have gone on the record, said what their position is. It's a pretty small number that have not said what their position will be for next year.
Yep.
Thank you, Jessica. We love our overseas listeners. Pass the word. Spread the word.
And now this week's interview with a special guest.
Hopefully you caught Lisa's interview with Jeremy Lowe, who is the Assistant Vice Provost of Enrollment at American University, and he is in his 15th year at American University. And in part one, he covered lots of things about American University, but in this final part, Jeremy talks about the kind of student that does well at AU. He explains the type of student that doesn't do well at AU. He explains the admission process at AU, and he breaks some new news about a major change that may be forthcoming in the next 3 years. Jeremy talks about how a student can be intentional about their engagement with American University. And American University has been test optional for 15 years. And Jeremy talks about what the research shows about how well test optional students do at AU. Finally, Jeremy goes on the hot seat in our lightning round. Listen and enjoy.
So what kind of student do you think does well at American?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think students that are interested in an active learning environment do really well. So they're not passive learners. They're curious. They like to ask questions. They like to engage with peers. They're comfortable understanding and appreciating different ideas, ideas that are different from their own. Respectful dialogue and discourse, I think, are paramount within our community. I mentioned the hands-on learning piece. I think students that want to see learning happen in a real world setting will appreciate a school like American University because they will have so many opportunities to learn in a hands-on setting. I think students at AU who do really well also appreciate being in a community that is representative of the world that we're in. One of the things that I have always loved about AU is how our student body reflects the world and its many facets, whether it's cultural and racial diversity, socioeconomic diversity, diversity of thought and academic interest, political beliefs. Students with different political leanings do really well here. Students with an international perspective, I've always valued the international presence that AU has. If that's the type of community that excites you, then you'll really thrive at a place like AU because you'll be surrounded by a group of students who also share in that belief. And that kind of perpetuates itself. It kind of self-fulfills, and our community becomes really engaging, open to discourse and discussion, open to hands-on learning. And those are the types of students that we find that do really, really well here.
All right. So who doesn't do well then?
Oh, that's a great question too. Yeah, I think what I see now from time to time within our community are students that I think it can be really easy to live a more isolated life with technology. You can close yourself off some, and we find that students who aren't as engaged within their community on campus tend to not do as well. So I think do a lot, especially for first-year students, to open them up to their community and help them find their place in a network of peers that can support them, that share their interests and so forth. But I do think I've seen within college-going students that it is easier these days to kind of be more insular to the rest of your community because of the impact that technology has had. So part of what we try to do is break down those walls and barriers and try to expose students to a broad community here early on within their AU tenure. A program that kind of speaks to this is the AU Cornerstone program that I mentioned, or our University College Living Learning Community. Both are first-year living learning communities for incoming students that puts them in a place where they're going to be with peers that share a similar interest to them. whether it's through hands-on learning, like students that are interested in doing an internship component early on in their college years, or students that are a part of university college that are interested in problem-based learning as a component of university college. So if you're a problem solver, you'll be in a community that is also with other problem solvers. So it'll kind of help you meet others that you might not have otherwise met, and you know that they share an interest to you. So I think we do a good job of trying to help all students thrive at AU, but those would be students that I think need a little bit more to find success on our campus.
Sure. Well, tell us a little bit more about your admissions deadlines, what your requirements are, and that type of thing.
Yeah, we have a very similar application plans to other institutions. So we currently offer an early decision plan that has early decision 1 and early decision 2. Our deadline for early decision 1 is November 15th, and early decision 2 is January 15th. And our regular decision deadline is also January 15th. And early decision, as you may know, is intended for students that have AU at the very top of their college list. It's their first choice. And I do think early decision can be an excellent option for students that know where they want to be, and it can help close the college search process out a lot sooner than you otherwise would. Our notification timeline, so early decision 1, we try to notify usually the second or third week of December, certainly before the winter holidays set in, and well before the new year. Early decision 2, we try to do it by February 15th. This year did it on February 14th, so we made a lot of students really happy on Valentine's Day. And then our regular decision notifications, they always go out by April 1st, but this year we're slated to go out by March 14th. It comes at you fast. This is kind of candid early information, but we're assessing what an early action plan might look like for AU. And I wouldn't be surprised if early action is a part of our process within the next 3 years, or certainly possibly sooner. So our current offerings are an early decision and a regular decision deadline, but that may change in the next couple of years.
Now, do you take more students in the early decision rounds than in the regular decision rounds?
We do, yeah. The admit rate for early decision is quite high. The last 5 years, it's averaged around 80% acceptance rate for early decision students. And our regular decision acceptance rate has fluctuated over the years, and I think the pandemic was pretty disruptive, at least for a period of time with our admission rate. But it's generally in the mid to high 30s, up to 50%, kind of depending on what our class looks like and what our incoming class size is going to be. The reason we can have an admit rate of 80% on an early decision class is because the size of the early decision pool is so much smaller than our regular decision pool. This year, for example, we received about 800 or so early decision applications, and again, an admit rate of about 80% on that group. And regular decision, we have just over 18,000 regular decision applications. So we simply have to be a little bit more selective within the regular round than we are with the early round. Now, an assumption that might take hold with early decision students, that these are students that are not as academically qualified. And that's not true within our pool. If you look at the academic quality of our early decision class, they are competitive within our overall pool. They're just self-selecting in a lot of respects. They're saying, hey, you're my first choice. And as an institution, we're saying, hey, we hear you. We would really like to have you on our campus. So it really helps us identify students that are deeply interested in AU, and it allows students that have AU at the top of their choice to wrap it up sooner.
Let's take a break to learn about Mark's recommended resource for the week.
This is Linda with this week's recommended resource, Teen Life Summer Programs. Teen Life has curated thousands of summer programs for middle and high school students. From intensive research internships to creative arts camps or leadership opportunities, there are options for nearly every student. You can search programs by categories like entrepreneurship, faith-based, STEM, or traditional camp experiences. You can also narrow your search by destination, session length, age, gender, cost, and selectivity. Each listing provides detailed information about the program, including duration, location, costs, and focus areas, making it easier to find a summer experience that's the right fit for your student. Start planning your student summer at teenlife.com/summer.
Now, do you track demonstrated interest? I mean, obviously, ED is the best kind of demonstrated interest there is, but
Oh, that's such a great question. So when I first started at AU, I felt that we were the poster school for demonstrated interest. We talked about it proudly. It was a part of our discussion point with prospective students and families, and it really took hold. And what we were seeing through that intense messaging were applicants that were showing interest for the sake of showing interest. We would hear students say, it's like, well, I was told I had to come to this webinar if I wanted to be admitted. It's like, well, okay, we hear you. That might not be what we intended, but that as we were talking about earlier, this kind of scarcity mindset. If an applicant knows something that might increase their likelihood of admission, they're bound to do it, whether it is intentional or not. So interest is not as much of a driver in our process as it was, say, 7 or 8 years ago, but it is still something that we look at. And I think within our pool, given the size of our applicant pool, we are looking for applicants who were intentional in applying to AU. And part of that intentionality comes from getting to know an institution, whether it's through a campus visit, showing up at a college fair, or a visit to the student's high school. We offer informational interviews. We host regional events around the country. We offer a bevy of webinars throughout the admission cycle. So there are a lot of ways for an applicant to connect with AU and understand if we're the right type of college community for them to consider. So we do want our applicants to be intentional when they apply to AU, and some of the best ways to know that is to see how a student has interacted with us through the process. But I will say that there are every year a good number of students who are offered admission that had no formal contact with AU prior to being admitted. They didn't visit the campus, they didn't come to an event or anything like that. But I think technology enables applicants to have a really good understanding of a school community without doing some of those more formal touch points along the way. The best example that I could give you is within my own admissions territory over the years. So I previously worked with students from the U.S. territories, so Puerto Rico, the U.S. Virgin Islands, Guam, American Samoa, and oftentimes I would get this Guamanian applicant. So they're on the other side of the world. They're not visiting our campus. They're not attending a webinar because the webinar is happening at 2 a.m. their time. But through their own research, they convey through their application what an AU education would mean to them and how they would thrive in our community. We are glad to admit those students. They know who we are, they know what we have to offer. And on the same lens, we also see applicants that have done everything. They've visited campus, they attended these events, but there are some applicants where it's still unclear why they chose to apply to AU, whether it's through academic program, they've done all this stuff, but they're still undecided academically. It's like, well, why is that? You've connected with us so much, you know so much about our programs. What hasn't connected with you up to this point? Or you see applicants that have a qualitative application, so the extracurricular activities and stuff that really just doesn't align with our community fully. So you could see both ends of it. Students that have shown a lot of interest that still might not be as intentional in applying to AU, and students who have shown no interest but are really intentional in their decision to apply.
Yeah, it's hard to parse out on your part, I must say. That would be difficult. And so there are no test scores that are needed. You will look at them if they send them, but if they don't?
We do, yeah. So we're still test optional, and we do assess the SAT or ACT scores if a student provides them. But the last 4 years, over half of our applicant pool has applied test optional. So more often than not, we are not assessing standardized testing as part of our review with an application.
Now, I know there's been a lot of talk about standardized testing and the role it may or may not play in predicting student performance. Have you guys found that to be an issue at American?
No, that's a great question. So when we first started offering a test optional policy, we for the first 6 years, it was in a pilot program. So there were things that we did to try to keep the pool small those first few years so we could assess kind of persistence of those students. Did they retain each year? What was their academic achievement like? And were they graduating? Those were the questions we were trying to ask in that first 6 years. And we had affirmative answers to all of those questions. Our students were persisting that came in test optional. For the most part, what we saw that were GPAs in the first semester were a little bit lower than students that came in with test scores, but not in a prohibitive way. And they would normalize after their first year of study at AU. So the academic performance, the quality of it wasn't impacted by that at all. And at the end, these students were crossing the graduation stage and getting a degree from AU. And once we had a firm understanding that those were all true, we were really confident in test optional admissions. Mm-hmm. We took it out of a pilot phase, opened it up to all, and have been really pleased with where we've been because of our test optional policy. I think it has enabled more students to consider AU over the last 15 years than we otherwise would have had. And as a first generation student myself, who was really I don't think test scores represented my academic potential, it's really reassuring to know that students can go into this process knowing that their 4 years of high school work will be the driver in their consideration for admission, not their standing on a standardized test score.
Well, that sounds great. And you guys do have a supplemental essay, or at least you did this year. Is that something you'll continue, do you think?
Yeah, we will, and it's optional. So it really is optional. We have students every year that.
Because I always tell kids it's never optional. You always have to do it.
If it's optional, it's required. No, what we see, students that choose not to do our supplemental essay are ones that are also applying to our honors program or one of our other programs that also has required essays with it. So for them, I could see the rationale. It's like, well, I've submitted 3 or 4 other essays for this program. I don't necessarily need to do this. And I think that is sound thinking on the student's part. I really do. Our supplement is optional, but I do think it provides students a space to share with us why they're considering AU and what stands out to them with an AU education. What I am pleased with is that it is optional, where I know a lot of institutions that have really doubled down on supplemental essays, where they'll now have 2, 3, or 4 additional essays associated with their application. And I do think that can really increase the amount of stress and anxiety that comes in with the process when you have an application that you could do through the Common App, but you're still spending a great deal of time trying to customize these essays for specific schools. So for us to kind of back away from that type of thinking with our application, I think has made a positive difference for students in being able to apply to AU in a way that suits their interests and what they feel stands out as strengths within the application process, while not bogging down the process too much either.
Mm-hmm. Great. Well, thank you so much for all of this information, but you're not done with me yet, because no guest on Your College Bound Kid gets to leave without being on the hot seat for a few questions where we just ask you trivial things to try to get to know you a little better.
I love it. Yeah, let's do it.
Okay. So, what shows have you been binging lately?
Oh my gosh, it's such a great question. So lately, I just finished a show on HBO called Love and Death, which was really, really good. It was based on a true story in the 1960s and 70s. I'm currently watching on Amazon the show Reacher. It's kind of my guilty pleasure, based off Jack Reacher, the novels by, I forget who wrote those books. That's been an excellent show. And then my wife and I really like to watch The Amazing Race while we're eating dinner. So that's kind of what we stick with for dinner time is an episode of The Amazing Race.
Yeah, my daughter, who's my oldest, she really wants her and I to go on The Amazing Race. We fight a lot, but we also have very opposite strengths. So I think it'd make for great TV.
Yeah,
But-
that's what we're watching for, is great TV. So.
And then what is on your bucket list in terms of travel? Where haven't you gotten to you'd really go?
Oh my gosh. So I've had the good fortune of traveling all over the country and to several countries because of AU. A place in the world I've always wanted to go, or something I've always wanted to do, is I like to hike. I've been an avid hiker for a number of years, but long on my list to do is to climb Mount Kilimanjaro in Africa. It's Africa's highest peak, and it's one of the more attainable highest peaks in the world. Obviously, Mount Everest is, I ain't doing that. And, there are other high peaks like in the US, Denali. Sorry, I was thinking of Mount McKinley, but Denali, I ain't climbing that either. But with a little bit of acclimatation, acclimating to the altitude, Kilimanjaro is one of the more accessible highest peaks in the world. So that's been high on the list, and I really would like to go to India at some point. Culturally, I think it's very rich and offers such an array of experiences. So. Climb Kilimanjaro, go to India. We'll hopefully do those sooner than later.
Right. Well, I'm glad you're not climbing Mount Everest, or I'd have to put you on my worry list, I think. Because everything I read about that, it sounds very dangerous.
Oh gosh, no, too dangerous. I'm a risk-averse type of person.
So now, if you were not going to be an admissions officer, what other alternate career would you have?
Oh my gosh, yeah. So in high school, I was in a punk rock band, and that's something I probably would have tried to play out a little bit more and tried to become a professional musician, which can be a very challenging career if you're, not wildly successful, and it can still be very challenging when you're wildly successful. Also, when I was in high school and college, I mowed lawns, and that is something that I really enjoyed doing. So if I wasn't doing this, I probably would be doing lawn care or landscaping in some capacity. I truly mean that. It was some of the most satisfying and rewarding work I've ever done in my life.
Yeah, no, I totally see that. I feel the same way about vacuuming.
Yeah. There's like a sense of completion. You
Exactly.
Like I would take great pride in making somebody's lawn look good. And then you'd have to do it all over again the next week because the grass grew back. I grew up in Florida too, where the grass grows constantly there. So there's always work to be done.
Well, that's great. Well, thank you so much for coming on the podcast, for educating us about direct admissions and telling us more about all the great things that University has. I really appreciate you taking the time to speak with me.
Thank you for having me. It's been a true pleasure.
All right. Thank you.
And now this week's interview with a special guest.
Friends, hopefully you caught the first part of my interview with Chris Cage, the VP of Enrollment at Belmont University, and the topic is Understanding Belmont University. Well, this is a 3-part interview, and in part 2 of 3, Chris talked about Belmont's nursing program last week, and this week he talks about multiple programs that are housed within the Curb College of Entertainment and Music that are outstanding. Next, Chris talks about some of the top programs in the Omar College of Architecture and Design. Then Chris turns his attention to the Jack C. Massey College of Business. Then Chris expands on what it means that a Belmont University is a Christian university. Chris talks about the states that are most represented in the Belmont student body and the explosive geographic growth they've had over the last 20 and even the most recent 10 years. Chris describes what Belmont's personality is. Then Chris talks about some of Belmont's institutional priorities. And finally, Chris tells us what Belmont needs to do to improve and become a better university. Listen and enjoy. So talk to me about 2 other programs. I heard a lot about these programs when I was on campus, as much as I did about music, to be honest. The first is entertainment and media management. And then the next is recording arts technology. What can you say about those? I know those are 2 other marquee programs.
Yeah, so within the Curb College, we have, well, there's a number of, I mentioned that we have the Ocean Way studio, which is on Music Row, but we also have a couple of recording studios on campus, the Robert Malloy Recording Studios in the bottom of the Massey Center, in the basement level of the Massey Center. So there are opportunities where our students, our commercial music students, might be doing some work, but so this is where this kind of collaboration across the colleges really has an impact. And if I could, I wanted to share about how our nursing program started interacting with colleges outside of the Inman College of Nursing, where they are recording music partnering with the College of Music and Performing Arts, CMPA, and the nursing students, where the College of Music and Performing Arts students are recording music, putting it on an MP3 player, and then taking that to hospitals in the NICU units to help with music therapy for young infants. So there's this sense of collaboration is where I was going with that happens across our colleges that really makes this place pretty remarkable. So what are some of those other marquee programs you mentioned? Yeah, absolutely. Audio engineering technology, creative entertainment industries. So again, housed within the Curb College. Our dean for the Curb College is Brittany Schaefer, and she joined us from Spotify. She also has a law background. So when we think about the connections that someone of that sort of caliber can bring to the faculty and staff within Curb College, and then what that allows our students to do within those disciplines. Brittany has ideas of how she wants to really transform Curb College to be the leading entertainment and music business college in the world. Her words. And so how do we do that? That's going to come from industry connections where our students are going to have hands-on practical experiences during their 4 years here, so that when they do leave Belmont, they're able to go out and have an immediate impact on that industry.
What are some other programs that you feel you'd just be remiss if you didn't mention? I'm not going to ask you to go all the way down the course catalog, but these are some of the ones that you find people are coming multiple states, skipping over lots of other states to come pick you because I just love this program here at your school. What else comes to mind?
There's a handful that jump out. The O'Moore College of Art and Design, which within that program we have architecture, interior design, and fashion design. And that is a program that is collaborating with our colleges across the university. So doing some remarkable work. And we are seeing students coming from all over the country for architecture in particular. And that's a 5-year program. And really we're having this challenge of we've kind of outgrown the physical limitations or the physical capabilities of the space that we have. So we're thinking about, okay, what kind of plays do we need to make within some of our space across campus to help with architecture's growth? And then the Massey College of Business is doing phenomenal work with local business leaders. And a great example would be supply chain management. It's a relatively new program that we have, but when Amazon moved jobs to Nashville, we said, well, wouldn't it make sense for Belmont to have supply chain management as a degree program? And then the College of Science and Mathematics, Tom Spence is the dean of that program. Just phenomenal work in his ability to say, we are going to be undergraduate in our focus, and we are going to be so hands-on with our students that they have research opportunities if and when they want it. So biology, chemistry, the hard sciences. What Tom is doing is he is putting Belmont in a space where, yes, we're known for our music business and our music programs, commercial music, but now people are saying, what about Belmont for biology, for chemistry, for biochemistry, for psychology? And that is, as of this year, the college with the most amount of applications, even surpassing Curb College. So we think that there's something going on with what Tom and his staff is doing over in the College of Science and Mathematics to really draw out this level of interest that, quite frankly, was unanticipated here maybe 4 years ago.
Chris, you said it before, and unapologetic about your mission. And I know the video I saw, at Belmont, started out saying at Belmont, Christ is the center of all we do. What does that practically look like? Like, there's a family who identifies as Christian, and they're going to that's going to resonate with them immediately. But there may be another family that doesn't, but they like a lot of the other things they're hearing. So how do you sort of determine if someone's spiritually aligned or at least comfortable with your Christ-centered approach to education?
Yeah. So the way that we see that play out practically is that we do have a chapel on campus. We have chapel twice a week on Mondays and Fridays, 10 o'clock, where we have guests that come in, but then we also have university leadership that participates in chapel worship opportunities. We have a Department of University Ministries. We have a vice president for spiritual development, a campus chaplain, a university chaplain, and then other individuals within university ministries that help shape the religious experience for our students. Now, a question that we get a lot is, does my son or daughter have to be Christian to go to Belmont? And that answer is no. Certainly we attract, I think because of the way that we lead with that mission and vision, a lot of times that grabs the attention of parents, because parents have a sense of what that might mean. And then they come and visit, and then it affirms what they were thinking being a Christian and Christ-centered university means, and that affirms their decision. And then the student comes alongside that and says, yes, I can get behind that. I really kind of enjoy that. But there is this sense of maybe comfort. There is this sense of how my son or daughter is going to be taken care of as a human while they're here, not just a student, right? They're not just here to consume education, but they're here to learn how they're going to grow into this young adult before they go out into the world. So how it takes shape practically, do students have to be Christian to go here? No. Faculty and staff. So I went through a process when I was interviewing where I had to talk about my faith journey and faith formation and how faith is important to me. And that's still part of our interviewing process for faculty and staff, although we're expanding what that means. And we just, I don't know if maybe some of your listeners, maybe you saw this, it was late in the headlines last week inside higher education where Belmont hired its first rabbi. So
I did see that.
Yeah. So when President Jones talks about being Christ-centered, that does not mean just Christian. He would say that it's big tent Christian, where everybody is welcome to come to the table. And it's just like the diversity conversation that we were having at the top of the show, that we want to bring people from diverse perspectives together that have a shared level of respect, whether I am Muslim, whether I'm Jewish, whether I'm Catholic, or whether I'm Presbyterian. There is this shared understanding of what it means to be Christ-like in the way that we interact with each other, the way that we interact with our students, the way that we care for them. And so for us, I think in practicality, that's what it looks like. It looks like we are putting the needs of others first. One of the things that President Jones changed during his inauguration, and I know that he would mention this if he were asked about it, but a lot of times when there's the formal procession for graduation ceremonies or when we have a convocation, there's a mace that you'll see a lot of university leadership walk with. Well, we changed that out at his recommendation. And instead, what we carry out in our processional is a towel and a basin, in the same way that Christ would wash the feet of other individuals, other followers. That is the sort of symbolism that we want to make sure is always at the center of what we're doing, that we want to care for others, that we want to have that level of empathy and compassion where we're not judging, we're seeking to understand first and then seek to be understood. So that's kind of, I think, practically how it takes shape.
You know, Chris, another thing you talked about when I visited was the transformation from being mostly a Tennessee school to more of a national school. Talk to us a little bit about the states where you've experienced the greatest surge of application growth over, well, let's just say in your time since you've been there.
Yeah, it's really, it goes back to that transformation from the early 2000s. It's quite remarkable. We used to be 70% from the state of Tennessee, and primarily I would say Middle Tennessee, so the Nashville area and that kind of middle swath of the state. We've completely turned that on its head, and now 70% of our enrollment comes from outside of the state of Tennessee. And the states of origin where we've seen the most growth, Texas, California, Georgia, Florida, Pennsylvania, Ohio, New York, Massachusetts, Connecticut. So kind of this region within the Northeast, the South and the Southeast, and then West Coast. But we have all 50 states represented. We might only get, one or two from North Dakota, South Dakota,
Sure.
Hawaii,
That's true
and
for a lot of
Alaska.
people. It's true for a
Yeah.
lot of people. Throw Idaho in there.
But yeah, Texas for sure. We've seen just exponential growth out of Texas. Illinois for the longest time has been in I want to say our top 10. But we've started to see some of these other states kind of jockey for position outside of Tennessee, where again Texas, Georgia, California are really up there.
How would you describe Belmont's personality?
Oh my gosh. It is such a creative place. It is so collaborative. And I think within a lot of higher ed circles, there is so much inertia behind what happens and how it happens. And there maybe is this fear or this sense of risk aversion. Belmont is not that way whatsoever. And that's probably one of the most refreshing things about it. We said earlier that we're not afraid to swing for the fences. And I think that sort of entrepreneurial spirit and that sense of we're going to try this, and if we fail, that's okay. We're going to learn from it. And we're going to fail forward so that we can learn from those mistakes and just be this level of dynamic change, for lack of a better word. But I would say it's creative, number one, and I think that happens from all of just the musically inclined individuals who are here. But then it's also collaborative. So we don't have commercial music individuals who come here and that's all they do. They are also collaborating with folks in the business college, within nursing, given that example where I talked about the NICU, and we're recording music for those infants, but we're also collaborating with the College of Liberal Arts and Social Sciences, the College of Education, Watkins College of Art, O'Moore, the list goes on and on. So if I were to boil it down to just two, I'd say three: creative, collaborative, and entrepreneurial.
Love it. And what would you say are some institutional priorities that Belmont has that you're comfortable discussing, either ones that may be in a strategic plan or ones that are not articulated in a strategic plan, but you have a sense of this is kind of who we want to be, where we want to be 5 to 10 years from now?
Yeah, so some of that does involve growth. We want to continue to see growth for the university at both the undergraduate and the graduate level. I do see that primarily coming more on the graduate side of the house, especially with the Frisk College of Medicine, once that's fully enrolled with 500 students. That alone right there takes our graduate population from roughly 1,600 to 2,100. But we know that we are going to see additional growth on the graduate side of the house. And then on the undergraduate side, we have to think about what is our utilization rate and are we at 100% capacity? And in some respects, we are, from classroom space to the cafeteria. And we need to think about, as we grow our residential footprint, and we're going to open a new residential hall in the fall of 25 that's going to take our capacity from 4,300 to 5,000 students living on campus. I think that will be a critical inflection point where we say, do we lean in again and think about building another residential hall? And if so, how large? Because at that point, our undergraduate population will probably be somewhere around 7,800 to 7,900. And then, okay, what is the upper limits of enrollment growth for the university? And that's probably somewhere around 10,000, 10,200. But then we need to think about educational innovation. So this online arm for Belmont University, where my colleague, Dr. Paula Gill, who's been here for over 30 years and been at the forefront of a lot of this transformation, she is leading our initiatives on Belmont Online. And that's going to be degree granting programs. That's also going to be certificate programs, upskilling and reskilling with local employers. That's going to be alumni coming into and out of the ecosystem to upskill and reskill. So some of those things are, I think, what are shaping our decisions right now that are going to maybe continue to transform the university over the next probably 5 to 10 years.
What does Belmont need to do to become better? What do you need to improve?
Oh my goodness. Well, we need to continue to attract the best and the brightest faculty. We know that faculty have just this tremendous impact on our students. Alumni come back and say that all the time. What is their most memorable experience about the university? It's the engagement that they had with faculty. So we want to be a first choice option for faculty members within their discipline. That is first and foremost, I think, a priority for us. But we also want to provide the optimal living, learning experience for our undergraduate students on campus. We want to make sure that whatever their needs are, that could be co-curricular, that could be internship, career placement, student success and flourishing, you fill in the blank. We want to provide an optimal living, learning experience so that those students are well positioned for success on the other side of graduation. And that student gets to define what success means. That's not for us to define. Success means placement within X sort of organization. No, it is how are we supporting our students so that when they leave here by 4 or 5 years from now, I mentioned we have 800 businesses that were formed from Belmont graduates. Maybe that number is 900 or 1,000 at that point. I don't know, but we want to empower our students to figure out what do they love, what are they passionate about, and what does the world need, and then how can they go out into the world and make that impact. So I think it starts with, first and foremost, attracting the best-in-class faculty to make sure that we have staff who are here to take care of our students, to give them all the resources that they need to be successful, and the rest will take care of itself.
Friends, this concludes the second of 3 parts of my interview with Chris Cage, the VP of Enrollment on Understanding Belmont University. We hope you join us next week for the final part. On Monday's episode, I will be giving you a recap because I fly out on a college flyout program first thing tomorrow morning to Memphis, Tennessee to visit Rhodes College, and I return the next day. So I'll be doing a visit recap. And I know Gil Villanueva was just on our podcast, but I'll add some fresh perspectives of things he'd never addressed. We'll take a Speakpipe question from a listener, and we'll continue with Lisa's excellent interview with Elizabeth Hamlet, a specialist in helping students with disabilities successfully transition to college. And friends, remember, it's not where you go. It's not where you go. It's not where you go, but it's what you do when you get there, and it's what you do when you get out of there. That is what will determine your career success. See you on Monday, friends. And that's our show. A big thank you to you, our listeners, for tuning in this week. If you find this podcast helpful, please follow us, and you'll get every single episode as soon as it is released. If you're interested, there are a few ways you can really support our podcast. You can click the share button and send it to your friends and acquaintances. You can help us pay our staff and our expenses by donating on our website. You can write a review for us on Apple or Spotify. I'm the producer of the podcast, but we have a fantastic team of 15. Shout out to our co-host, Dr. Lisa Ruff, Dr. David Williams, Linda Depker, Susan Tree, Vince Garcia, and Julia Esquivel. And to our substitute co-host, Sylvia Borgo. Our sensational sound engineer is Nemanja Motvich. Our amazing music is from Victor Allen Weeks. Marketing designs are from Kimberly Blass. Lily Parikh manages our Instagram. Our image editor is Talha Khan. Joyce Ducker does our website episode updates. And our webmaster is Stalianos Dimitriou. And if you want to have a coaching session with Lisa, Linda, or me, just text me at 404-664-4340. If you have a question you want us to answer, or if you have a recommended resource or article you think we should discuss, just send it to questions@yourcollegeboundkid.com. Our favorite method is for you to record your own voice at speakpipe.com/YCBK. By the way, check out our website, where you'll find lots of content that is not on any podcast app. Our website is yourcollegeboundkid.com. If you want to learn about other hot admissions topics, follow us on Twitter at YCBK Podcasts. We think of you as our listening family, and we look forward to meeting again with you every single Monday and Thursday.